And we're live, Mark.
And we're live, Greg, live with the ATS podcast. Mark Lawrence, along with our panel of experts, Jim Feist, joining us from Las Vegas, as he always does. Andy Iskoe from TheLogicalApproach.com, also in Las Vegas. A lot of Vegas guys here, a lot of Vegas sharps on this show. And Greg DePalma, our producer extraordinaire, also joining us on the set today. And we're going to preview the AFC, the American Football Conference, the National Football League AFC Preview. This will be a beauty, guys. Get your pens and pencils ready because we've got a lot of great stats and facts we're going to run by you on the show today. And I want to remind everybody out there that this is a free podcast for everybody. If you like what we're doing, simply hit the subscribe button, the like button. You do us a big favor if you do just that. If you got any questions or comments, you can send them to us. We'll be glad to answer all of them. And also, I'm going to let everybody know here that we are also going to be beginning soon. I keep saying this soon when the football season begins, before it begins, our Beat the Experts contest. If you're familiar with the Playbook Wise Guys contest, it'll run quite similarly to that. We'll be making selections each week, and you can participate and you can try and be better than yours truly, Jim Feist, Andy Iskoe, Greg DePalma. And if you do, you can say that you knocked the snot out of us because that's what we're going to be doing with the contest this year. It'll be a lot of fun, believe me. Also, I want to remind everybody here that we're doing a lot of great things with football here now. It's Football Interview Extravaganza on the network here right now. Jim, as he always does, he's doing his interviews, great interviews, one-on-one interviews with Jim Feist. Check out those daily. I think Jim does them every Tuesday, I believe. Is that correct, Jim?
Well, I try to do them. I try to do them on Monday and air them on Tuesday. Sometimes I can do them Saturday or Sunday and air. I think the airing date is Tuesday. I can do them a couple days earlier because we have other things on the channel as well. So I think Tuesday is the airing date.
Cool. So mark that down, guys. Tuesdays to check out the Jim Feist interviews. A lot of great in-depth nuggets you'll pick up from interviews like that. Greg DePalma, he's doing all 32 NFL team interviews, a lot of college football interviews. They're in the library. You can check all those out. Just concluded were interviews that Greg has done Monday. He is doing, or I should say he did, the Chicago Bears. Also coming up, the LA Chargers he did Monday night. Greg's also going to be doing Wednesday doing the Arizona Cardinals with Hod Rabino, publisher of the Devil's Digest. On Thursday, LSU, he's going to preview the LSU Bengals with Sonny Ship from 247sports.com. It's all here on ProLine TV, guys. Just check it out, mark it down, hit the like button, subscribe, and ring the bell, and we'll keep you in touch all season long with what we're doing here on the platform. And with that, I want to welcome our guys into the show here. I mentioned Jim Feist from Las Vegas. Jim, how is everything going for you in Vegas? Did you hop back to Cleveland, or are you still in Vegas?
I'm leaving. Matter of fact, you're coming in town, and I'm leaving.
Oh boy!
So it's one of those things. I'm going back. I go back a couple times a year to go to the Cleveland Clinic. That's where I get almost all of my medical stuff done because it's a great facility. As you, Mark, you're from there, so you know how good that is, and great doctors. I think there's like 5,000 doctors in this one building. I mean, it's amazing. It's amazing.
Literally, yes.
I mean, it's like a city.
Yes, it is.
It's really. I mean, Cleveland is not known for having great sports teams, or there may be the great sports teams that just don't win. But when it comes to medical stuff, I don't know that there's any place better.
That's the reason, Jim, that a lot of these sheiks and shahs and whatnot from Saudi Arabia and Iran, they all come over to the Cleveland Clinic. When they've got
I think the only other one that has that notoriety, I think, is the Anderson Clinic down in Houston.
MD Anderson in Texas is mostly known for cancer as being the leading cancer hospital. Of course, you have the Mayo Clinic, which I think that's in Minnesota or something like that.
Yeah, I think it's Rochester, Minnesota, if I recall.
Okay. It was that's also excellent. Yeah.
Well, I'm glad to hear, Jim. Have a safe trip back to Cleveland. Give everybody, give them a big say hey from me. Tell Roz we say, and travel safe if you will do just that.
Thank you.
Andy Iskoe, TheLogicalApproach.com in Las Vegas. I know, Andy, you're a busy guy right now this time of the year. A lot of these football contests are going on. Andy does a great job proxying. He proxies for us in the contest. I'll be out to visit Andy here tomorrow on Wednesday. I'll be signing up for the contest with Andy Iskoe in Las Vegas, and we'll be having some chow. We'll be chowing some good food down, as I understand. Looking forward to doing just that. And Andy, I know you're kind of busy, aside from doing all your proxy work, you're probably pretty busy getting your football stuffing ready for the season as well.
Oh, absolutely. I'm probably working on 5 or 6 different projects every day. And so those are like 18 to 20-hour days for me right now, because we're running, want to be prepared once we kick off actually the college season, which is a week from this Saturday on August 23rd. And then you've got the first full weekend, which is August 30th, which is the Saturday of Labor Day weekend. And of course, you've got some games on Thursday and Friday prior to that. And of course, I also prepare for the FCS division games, the old Division 1 AA, where I've been charting those teams for years and years and years. And most of the major sports books now having my prep work on that, getting all my computer programs together that I use for my weekly updating in the college season and the pro season, and meeting people to sign up for the contest, and finding some time to explain the contest and some of the strategies, etc., in the contest, which I've been doing with Jim. I think we did a video there a couple of weeks ago, and we'll probably touch upon some of that stuff during the season as we get deep into it. I will say something about the Survivor contest that I don't think people often realize just very quickly, and then you probably know that you can only use a team. This is a Circa Survivor, and Westgate now has a Survivors contest as well, and a high-end one, a $5,000 entry fee. The Circa one is $1,000. $15 million guaranteed in the Circa, and they're going to probably be closer to 20. But most people know that you can only pick a team. You make a selection each week for a team to win a game straight up in the NFL. No points involved. You can only pick a team to win once. But there is no limitation on how often you can pick against a team. So some people, and I recommend it as well, I use it myself, is as I go through the season schedule, looking to find the teams that I'm looking to play on, I'm also marking off the teams that I'm looking to play against at some point in certain matchups, etc. So that's another way of looking at it, because there's no limitation on how often you can go against a team. So if you can find a team that's going to be 3-13, and you can find some of the teams that they're likely to lose to, but you don't want to use them because you want to save them for the better teams, there'll be other teams for you to choose from. So that's, and by the way, I will say this, and Mark, you'll probably be at the Westgate. I know Jim goes to the Westgate. Right now in the preseason, they put out betting lines for all 18 weeks. So, for example, Mark, when you're out here and you remember the old, this is going on for almost 20 years with the Steelers and the Ravens, Tomlin and Harbaugh, longtime coaches. If you can find a line, let's say I don't know what the week is. Let's say it's week 11 where the Ravens are -3.5 against the Steelers. You can bet the +3.5 on the Steelers, because those are always 3-point games, and the underdogs often win those 3-point or less games outright. You can actually bet those games, but more importantly, where I'm getting to, it's a nice packet of 18 sheets, and you can, if you are in the Survivor, or even if you're just looking to play games ahead, you can actually take a look at what the lines are right now that you can bet, but save those sheets during the season so you can see when we get to, let's say, that Steeler-Ravens game, or Bears-Vikings rematch or whatever, how much the line has changed from what you could have bet the game at before any regular season games were played, and what the line is now on the week of the game. And then in your own observation and analysis, you can say, that's too much of an adjustment, or that's not enough of an adjustment. So you can basically see how the lines makers change from what we're all doing in the preseason, making prognostications, to what they do when the game is finally going to be the next game played.
It kind of goes hand in hand, Andy, with Steve Fezzik, a good friend of ours, who's really a sharp player. He's all about numbers and getting value and so forth and whatnot. And he often says that that you've made a good play when your play settles in at the closing number. I'm talking about opening numbers and then settling in at the closing number. Because if you settle in at the closing number and you're taking 2-3 points of value in that, that's exactly what value handicapping is all about. Yeah,
the theory is that the closing number is the best indication of the marketplace as far as what they think that line should be. All the factors that go into it, injuries, lineup changes, etc., position changes, etc. All that is baked into all that decision making and opinions, etc., is baked into that closing number. That's where it's settled. That's where it goes off at. Not, people always talk about getting the best value, and I know, Jim, we've talked about it with the opening number, but the opening number is subject to a lot of fluctuations very often. And really, when you think about it, only one person who makes the first bet is going to get the best number. And it's a trade-off. And I've been talking about this, for example, when we talk about season win totals. Do you want to get a season win total wager in July and perhaps get the best opening number you can find, but you're locked into it, okay, once you make that wager? Or what I do is I know pretty much for the 32 teams which way, the ones that I'm going to play and the opinions on the others, I already know if I'm going to go over or under. What I don't know yet is how confident I am in those games, in those overs and unders. And so I will wait. And the NFL did us a favor when they went from 4 to 3 preseason games, because now you've got 10 to 12 days after the final preseason game to evaluate all the injuries that occurred during the preseason and training camp, any players who are released in that 10 to 12 day period, any other free agents that might be signed, etc. I'd much rather have the trade-off is, do I play early and get, quote unquote, the best number, or do I wait late, maybe don't get the best number, but get the more current number with better information than I had if I made the play back in July?
Jim, what Andy says, I'm thinking this thought here in my mind is, I know when the season opening numbers came out, over under win totals, like Andy, I had a pretty good feeling of who I liked and where I was going to go. And I think part of the mission was getting in on those games before not only the totals moved, that they were juiced. The totals get juiced heavily. Example being, I like the Detroit Lions real well, under 10.5, and I laid them minus a dime. Now they're minus 70 cents under 10.5.
Yeah.
Do you look at that, Jim, when you're seeing this, or are you using those juiced numbers to tell you that that is the right side of the football game, or are you looking to fade it and take the value the other way?
Great question. Early in the process, the public really isn't involved very much. And if they are involved, they're involved with very small numbers, which really don't matter. So now that we have so many states that have legalized gambling, you might get a player at FanDuel's or DraftKings, which we can't play here in Vegas, that will come in and say, oh, I'm going to go under 10.5 for the Lions. But the bigger players, now you got to remember this too, a lot of bookmakers don't take big action on these numbers. So they take a $5,000 player may only be able to get down $500 on a play early, July, June, May, before the season. So you have to take that into consideration. So a bookmaker might move a number, a half a point on $10,000 in September, but he might move a half a point on $500 in July.
True. Good point. Real good point.
That's something. But what I'm really into this year, and more so than ever, and Andy and I have talked about this, and Greg and I have talked about it when we did our division things, is alternate numbers. So you took 10.5 and you went under on the Lions. What happens if you bet under 8.5? Now, what you're getting is a lot more value for your money. And if they really have a bad season and the loss of their offensive and defensive coordinator is doesn't get replaced with adequate talent.
Yeah, it factors in, right? Exactly.
Yes. Yeah. So you might be getting, instead of laying 1,000 to win 1,000, I don't even know what the number was you bet it at, but let's say you went under 8.5, which means they're going to win 7 and go 7-9, or
8-9, 8-9,
10 or 8-9, yes. Yeah. So you're going to get maybe 3-1 or 3.5-1, which I would make the bet you made if that's what you like, but I would also say, what kind of value can I get on an alternate bet? So let's say I'm going to bet $500. Let's $500 on the under 10.5, but I'm going to bet $200 on under 8.5. So that kind of thing is playing in my mind this year, because I listen to everybody. I meet all these guys that are really pro gamblers, and they win money, and they have these ideas of getting more value for your buck. Because most of the time, when you bet under 10.5, it's not necessarily means it's going to end up at 10. It could end up at 7.
Yes.
Yep.
So, I mean, you could go in and say today, and one of the points Andy made, betting against the team instead of worrying about betting on a team. Well, if you bet against the Saints this year in every game, you would be able to do that in most of the games unless it's a second time playing a division rival, because you wouldn't be able to bet that other team because you've already bet them. So
we're talking about Survivor.
Yeah, Survivor. So the bottom line is you can look for different angles to win money. You're not going to beat the bookmaker, generally speaking, playing sides and totals at the numbers they're giving you, because you're laying juice on every bet and they're not. So you're going to have to look for different angles, playoff propositions. Yeah. Instead of looking at who the teams are going to make the playoffs, let's talk about the teams that are going to miss the playoffs,
where you might get a plus price even.
Correct. So I'm looking for value. They talk about advantage players.
Yes.
And maybe that comes under the heading of advantage play. I'm not quite sure what the definition of advantage player is, but I know those guys actually win money. But when you look and say, okay, there's going to be 7 out of 16 make the playoffs, which means there's going to be 9 out of 16 miss the playoffs. And keep in mind this, when you're looking at the AFC and who's going to make the playoffs, got to remember that a team could go 7-10 and make the playoffs. Why? Because they do it by division.
Yes.
So if a team is 7-10, but they have a better record than the other 3 garbage teams in their division, they're in the playoffs. They shouldn't be there. I think it's a terrible rule, but they're going to be there, and they're going to go up against somebody that's 14-3. I mean,
and be a 7-point dog, right?
Yes, exactly. So,
right. And we saw that about 10, 15 years ago when the Saints, who had a better record, I think, than Seattle, was it, and went into Seattle and beat them badly, because Seattle won their division, I believe, with a weak record, and New Orleans went in there, I believe it was, and won pretty big.
Correct. So, the overall picture I'm trying to paint is, don't get locked into saying, okay, the game 6, Dallas is a 7-point dog to Philadelphia in the first game. There might be, with the offensive lineman getting hurt for Philly, maybe that's a take because that's a big injury. But then on the other side, you have the defensive player we don't even know is going to get signed. So, but you might be looking for props, first quarters, first halves, over and under on team totals. There's a million ways to make money than the old days when you could only bet the side and the total, and even before that, only the side, because the totals came into picture a lot later.
Yeah, well, I think the 1970s.
That's a great point you bring out, Jim, because as I alluded to, the value is gone from the Lions from where it opened because it got juiced out up to -70.
Yeah.
But what you say, and it's really, really prophetic, is look to the alternate line. So if you're playing them under 9.5 as opposed to 10.5, you may be taking plus rather than laying 77.
Right.
That's terrific.
I want to make one sort of allude to like an addendum to what I said before, and it came up when you talked about playing the Lions under. I said that I like to wait to have as much information as possible, but that applies more to teams that I'm looking to play over. Teams that I'm looking to play under, I want to get in at the best number, which is usually early, because for several reasons. Let's use the Buffalo Bills as an example, and their total right now is 11.5, juice to the over. Let's say you like the Bills under, and you played it when it came out, and let's say it was 11.5 and maybe minus 120 or something along those lines. Let's say even money, whatever it was. Okay, when you play an under, in most part, the only news that could affect the chances are going to be negative. Injuries, for example. So, for example, let's say, you played Buffalo under 11.5, and Josh Allen goes down with a season-ending injury in training camp. All of a sudden, their chances drop because Josh Allen is going to affect Buffalo's performance in 17 games. At the same point, Josh Allen's injury improves the chances of New England, Miami, and the Jets of going over the total because they're going to have 2 games this season each against the Josh Allen-less Buffalo Bills. So there's, I think, a built-in advantage early on in looking to play under because, again, 90% of the news that could affect a team's roster would be negative rather than positive, and thus, if you like a team under to begin with, you should maintain that position. It's the overs that I tend to look for more later on, and I try to concentrate. And then, again, there used to be a lot more value in playing teams under because back in the days of the 16-game schedule, there are 256 games are being played. If you added up the totals for the 32 teams, that 256 would sometimes come out to like 263 and a half. Well, you can't have 263 or 263 and a half wins. You can only have 256. So there's more value across the board generally in betting the unders. Now, the books realize this, and they made an adjustment. So now it's 272 games you play. So in the old days, that number might have been 278, 279 if you added everything up. So what they do now is the 272 games, and I don't have the numbers in front of me, but it's probably within a game or two either way. Let's say it's 274 instead of 272. So that's very close. They've got the entire 272 games up adjusted to 274. The thing is, though, what they do, and you guys both mentioned it, they adjust the VIG. So instead of going from 8.5 to 9, it'll be 8.5 minus 120. Now it's 8.5 minus 140. So there's still an advantage in going under, but sometimes the adjustment, especially for the overs. You take a look. I'll use the best example. I love Boise State in the Mountain West Conference this year to go over. I think it's 10.5 wins. The one loss will be at Notre Dame. Can't afford a second loss. But to go, and I don't see them losing a second game. Okay, you got to lay $1.90. I'm not going to lay 2-1 in a game of football where a key injury could be that much. If I'm going to lay 190, I'll do it in a parlay in a baseball game or something. But that's how they've adjusted. So the bookmakers have gotten smart by putting the total for the 32 teams closer to the actual number of games. But now they make you pay more if you want to go over or under some teams that are getting a lot of action.
Hey, guys, we got to get into our preview here. Great stuff. I mean, we could do a show just what we're talking about. Totals, value, lines, the alternate lines, as Jim mentioned here. A lot of great stuff. And that's what you learn here on our network here.
It's a master class, Mark. I think I heard someone say that.
It's a master class of information.
Let me say this. When Greg and I did the division analysis, and we did all of the divisions, we talked a lot about alternate line betting. And Greg had his opinions, I had mine, and we actually told the people who we were betting on those alternate lines and on the regular lines that are posted. So if they go back and listen to those, they're really excellent spots that we did.
They're in the library too out there for
Yes.
everybody.
Yes.
Just check them out, click on it, and you can hear exactly what Jim and Greg talked about on the show. Greg, I'm sorry I didn't look past you. We just kind of got knee deep into all this. How are you doing these days?
Now we can't hear him.
It sounds like he's knee deep into something else.
I was.
Oh, there you are.
I spent the last 15 minutes getting some other work done.
Okay. I understand.
Yeah. And anyway, because all of this information, as you guys said, we've talked about for the past several weeks. Andy and Jim put out a handicapping strategies video. You can check that out on the site. And of course, obviously Jim's interviews with some of the top handicappers in the industry and a lot of the people who have really did a great job in building the industry. Those are some of the really knowledgeable type of interviews that nobody else can get. So that's what's so great about the channel. But like I said, I'm just getting ready for the season, and I couldn't be any happier than with my New York Jets after watching them play in the preseason. Because what I've been preaching for the last couple of years is finally coming true, and that they've got the talent, but they had no coaching. And you can see the difference in the coaching for the New York Jets in just one preseason game.
Absolutely, for sure.
So I'm fired up.
I do have a point. I mean, Mark, I get off script sometimes, so stop me if I'm going
no
too
problem.
far.
I love it.
Because I'm pretty bad with the scripts. I'm sorry about that. I was going over all the teams I think are going to miss the playoffs. So when I get to the AFC East, which is, we're talking AFC,
right.
I look at the Jets at minus 600 to miss. I look at the Pats at minus 145 to miss. Do you guys think that there's such a big difference that's a big difference that's the number you would lay. I'm going to lay 6-1 for the Jets to miss I'm not saying I'm doing that. I'm saying that's what the odds say. Or I'd lay 145 for the Pats to miss. Do you think there's that much of a difference between those two teams that those odds should be that great?
No. But the lines makers do, because they made the season total on the Jets 6 and the Patriots 8.5. I think the Jets number may actually be a bit too low, because I could see them 7 or 8 wins. And I think the Pats, they're off, I think, 3 straight losing seasons, the last 2 of which they were 4-13. That's asking an awful lot for a team to double its season wins total from the past 2 years. In fact, and I know, Mark, you look to go against teams that have done exactly that. Yeah. I mean, even I think Washington last year, I think their number was like 6.5, but they would not fit that category this year as far as doubling wins over the previous 2 seasons or anything along those lines. So yes, to answer Jim's question, I would rate I would rate the Jets and the Patriots a lot closer. I would almost, if I were going to make a number before the season on the season win totals, I'd probably have them both at 7.
Yeah, Washington.
And I'd feel a lot more comfortable about the Jets because of the continuity of their roster than I do the Patriots, where there's a lot of. I mean, they've made great player acquisitions, but it's almost a team that seems to fit the mold of a team that's going to be better this year, but they're going to still have some issues, and maybe the year to look for them to be a playoff team would be in 2026, not 2025.
Well, we'll talk about Washington when we do the NFC next week, guys, in our preview. Just a little sidebar note before we get into the AFC. Washington fits that dynamic that Jim alluded to, and it's the fact that, or Andy did, the fact that they won more games last year than they did their previous 2 years combined. So now you're going to ask this team to continue on a forward roll, and you're going to be losing some value in the process. I'm looking for holes rather than putty to have that continue with these teams. So those are
I'm going to pose this question, Mark. Yeah. Is Washington this year going to do what you say historically happens, or will they be like the Detroit Lions of last year?
Well, that's a great question, Andy, because, Detroit, and I was in amongst the crowd that was an anti-Lion guy when the world was on the Lions and the world was right, and I was wrong. But it doesn't continue on forever. And in this case here, it happened with Washington with a first-year head coach and a rookie quarterback. And I think it's very, very possible that rookie quarterback, now that there's game film on him, could suffer a little bit of sophomore blues here in the National Football League.
Also, take a look at the games last year. What was it? Like 6 of their 7 wins were all one-possession games, very close games that could have gone either way. Remember that game against Chicago with the tipped Hail Mary pass that gave Washington a win? I mean, those are some of the things that you factor in. I always take a look each year, and one of the issues of the newsletter, I put it in there. What would have happened? What would the results have been, both record-wise and playoff qualification-wise, if you had reversed all the close games? In other words, a 3-point win instead of a win was a loss. A 7-point win might have been, the one-possession games had the reverse effect. And you'll find, and I guess the best example was Minnesota, who had all those one-possession wins in 2022, and then I think they were maybe 13-4 or something, and then they went 7-10 the next year because they regressed. You just can't win all those close games. The team that's going to be very interesting in that situation is one we'll talk about shortly, Kansas City. With all, 16-0 in their last 16 games decided by one possession.
Yeah, how long is that going to continue?
They've been running pretty lucky with 2.
Yeah.
The point you mentioned there, Andy, is a great one, and I keep digressing, and I have to get into these AFC previews. But you talk about what we do in our midweek alert. It's our statistical newsletter. We call it the daily racing form of newsletters. Is we rescore every football game, and we rescore the football games much like baseball does with the independent fielding ratings, and that's taking errors out of the equation here. We're taking turnovers out of the equation in the football games, and if they had played dead zero to turnovers rather than what they were, negative margins as such, what would the score of that football game have been? And those are really nice indicators of, you'll find teams that played well, lost the football game, but the rescore had them winning by 7 or 10 points. And you like to find football teams like that, especially in the second half of the season, when they've lost those games like that because of turnovers, and you begin to see a turn where the turnovers aren't there, the ball's not as slippery, and suddenly the worm turns for those football teams.
I wonder if you do something what I do. For example, a team that's +1 in turnovers is that's worth a field goal. If you're +2, that's 7. If you're +3, that's worth 10 points as far as making an adjustment in rescoring the game. So that now the vast majority of teams, and we know this, if you're really plus in turnovers one year, the vast majority of teams will show a regression the other year. There are very few teams. I think New England was one of the teams that was consistently plus turnovers because they didn't turn the ball over and the defense forced a lot. But most teams tend to regress. So I do something like that as far as even power ratings, where I will adjust them for turnovers using the most common margins by which you can win a football game. I mean, obviously the combination of two teams, but 3, 7, 10, 14, etc.
It's one of the reasons I look for.
Back in the day when I got here to Las Vegas, there was a gentleman who has now since passed away. He was a good friend of mine, Jim Barnes.
Yes.
Oh, sure.
And he did rescoring, and he taught me that. I never even thought about rescoring games.
Jim, my rescore I alluded to is basically the Jim Barnes formula. Okay.
Okay. He was way ahead of his time. Way ahead. I mean, this was 50 years, 60, almost 60 years ago.
Yep.
And he was doing this kind of stuff. He taught us, all of us, a lot about handicapping.
He and Mike Lee were two of the guys who really developed statistical handicapping for football back in the 70s and 80s.
Both of them, they were legends of their time. There's no question about that. They sure
were.
And one other point, you mentioned turnovers, Andy, here. It's no coincidence that the team in the National Football League that is dead last in overall turnovers one year improves vastly the next football season here. And that this year, my friends, would be my Cleveland Browns.
Now you're taking ownership. You call them my Cleveland Browns. You're taking ownership of the Browns
until they go like 8 games under 500. Then I'll refer to them as the Cleveland Browns. Okay.
Well, they are one of 2 teams, I believe, ever to go 0-16. The Detroit Lions were, I think, the first, and they certainly were able to turn that around. It may have taken a decade and a half, but they are finally, maybe this is the year. The 2 teams that were 0-16, or I think they're both 16-18. Would it be ironic if Cleveland and Detroit were in the Super Bowl?
Yes, it would.
Both for the first time.
The Saints could go 0-17.
Yeah,
they're pretty bad.
Yeah, they're looking rather weak, rather shallow. Okay, in the AFC, guys, we got to squeeze this in here. We're going to kind of do a little bit of a Cliff Notes version now at this point because we just talked a lot of great football talk. It was what I would call barstool talk. It was really good talk, information you'd share amongst each other if you're sitting in a bar having a couple of drinks. Now, the AFC preview here, and there's one thing in the AFC this year that sort of stands out and maybe is an indicator that they're the superior conference to the NFC. And if for no other reason, just take a look at what the current odds are for the most valuable player in the league this year. The top 4 leading candidates for most valuable player in the NFL this year are Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson at plus 550, Joe Burrow at plus 650, and Patrick Mahomes at plus 700. That's a big, huge advantage they have at the quarterback position, at least.
Correct. Yeah, they really do.
Against teams out of the NFC. So keep that in mind, when it comes down to something just like that. Let's share the current odds at DraftKings right now of the teams that we're looking at in the AFC to win the Super Bowl. Co-leaders, coincidentally, I mentioned Josh Allen and Lamar Jackson. Buffalo and Baltimore are both the co-leaders also to win the Super Bowl at plus 600. The Chiefs are plus 750. Kansas City plus 220. You see the parallel there, guys? The first 4 teams are all led by those quarterbacks. Then the Denver Broncos at plus 2,500 and the Chargers at plus 2,800. By
the way, that points out the huge gap between the top 3 teams, or 3 or 4 teams it was, and the rest of it. Usually you find some 12-1s, 18-1s, etc. You don't see that.
No, you don't. There's a little bit of a wide gap, I would say, maybe arguably between the Chiefs and the Bengals for what Joe Burrow brings to the table. I've got a lot of great stuff we can talk about him if time permits later on in the show. But Greg, anything we talked about here to date so far that might surprise you as far as the odds to win the Super Bowl?
Surprises? Probably, I guess I'd have to go all the way back to tell you the truth. Even though I know how hard it is for any of these sleepers outside like the top 30-1 range as we're looking at here who could actually win the Super Bowl. I think it's more of the fact that I think there are some teams that probably should get a little bit more respect, but that's a whole reason why I think that these are the teams you should probably go with. We talk about these Super Bowl futures all the time. You don't want to be putting your hard earned money sort of like on tap for 6 months. And if you are going to do that, then you definitely don't want to be doing it with short price teams. So, in that case, I think the Bengals at 22-1, because that's the one quarterback, Mark, that you talked about in the top 4 that is not in the top 4 as far as Super Bowl odds. And we understand why, but when you've got a Joe Burrow at quarterback of the Bengals and he's already made it to the Super Bowl once, then who's to say that he won't be able to make it again? And you are getting 22-1. I know the Denver Broncos are getting a lot of play right now. And this is not a surprise. Remember, we started talking about the Broncos like over a month ago about, this was a team to keep an eye on. And now that we're getting closer to the start of the season, that's exactly what you're hearing all over the airwaves. And the Chargers now, the big question is going to be, and I just interviewed Alex Insdorf last night, who covers the Chargers for Bolt Beat. And the deal there is, you lose your starting left tackle. They just gave him a boatload of cash. Now, the luck of the draw is that Jim Harbaugh is such a freak when it comes to building an offensive line that he drafted Joe Alt last year, who played left tackle for Notre Dame his whole career. So he can just slide over to left tackle. But the problem is now they're no longer going to be a dominant line, meaning that they're going to have to win in other ways.
No, but they'll still be a Jim Harbaugh line. And, like you mentioned, Greg, that's what he does. That's where it all starts with Jim Harbaugh. As a
better receivers this year as well.
Exactly.
They have an issue with the division they're in. That's the biggest. I mean, you got 4 Super Bowl head coaches there in that division. I mean, that's excuse the language. That is a bitch of a division.
Yes, it is.
So, I mean, you can't ignore the Chiefs. I mean, they've only won the division 9 straight years, 5 of the last 6 Super Bowls.
You sort of pointed out earlier, Jim. The thing is that, and this is one of the benefits of the schedule going from 16 to 17 games. Instead of 10 non-division games, you now have 11 non-division games. So you can theoretically go 2-4 within your division, possibly even 1-5, but let's say 2-4, and still make the playoffs, if not even contend for a division title, by going, say, 8-3 in your non-division games if you're that good of a team. And remember, the chances of going 8-3 in your non-division games is enhanced by the fact that the 6 games out of the 11 you're going up against, in the case of the AFC West, let's say look at the Chargers. Well, the Raiders aren't quite there yet, but the Chargers, 4 of their games are against Kansas City and Denver twice. So you're already facing 4 games against some of the best competition in football, and you still have an opportunity to go 8-3 in the other games.
Andy, can you check your chat for a second, Andy? By the way, you guys are talking about Jim. You're going over the alternate lines. I had never seen this one before, and I really like this. And that is, and we talked about this, Jim, a couple of weeks ago when we were going over the divisions, and that is division winner alternates. And this is what I really like because of this. Check out these division specials. You can decide who you think is going to finish first and second and get really good odds.
Yes.
And so let's just talk, for instance, let's just talk about, this is the West. So let me go ahead and see if I can grab, let's grab the East. Okay. So, because where you guys were talking about the biggest difference between the Patriots and the Jets. So here's the thing. We all know the Bills are gonna end up winning the division unless Josh Allen's hurt. Well, we just talked about the fact that we think the Jets are just as capable of being a second place team as the Patriots or Dolphins, and if they finish in second, you get 5-1.
Yeah, as opposed to 150 if the Patriots finish. I think they're really overpricing the Patriots and underpricing the Jets.
And you get all these other different scenarios that you can choose from if you think it's going to be Buffalo and New England or Buffalo and Miami. And with every division, of course.
Let me throw this at you guys here, and I'm going to roll back a little bit here to a team that I really like as the Cincinnati Bengals this year, and throw this at you for a thought to ponder here. Joe Burrow has really, really struggled, as we know, in the first 2 games of the season. He's 1-9. Cincinnati is. Look at the first 2 games.
By the way, Mark, is that Burrow struggling, Or the Cincinnati Bengals defense struggling?
Well, it's his team, okay?
Yeah.
So, because he was a starting quarterback, he takes the 1-9 record.
Which, by the way, is undeserved. Like I said, he's the Dan Fouts of this generation.
He could well be, okay?
He is that.
But look at his first 2 games he's got on tap this year. Cleveland, he goes to Cleveland and he hosts Jacksonville. You think he's going to start out 1-?
Have they ever won in Cleveland with Burrow?
It's a bad history.
Yeah, there is bad history, but right now it's still Cleveland, okay?
I think they did last year. I think they swept them last year. And look, what they're doing right now is finally they're listening to Joe Burrow. They've heard all the media talk about how they get off to slow starts, and they're finally doing something about it by playing their starters in the first preseason game, and all of that stuff matters. And so now I think that we have to be a little bit, on guard before we start going, well, Bengals always start off really bad, but you know what? They've never started all their young their players in early preseason games before, and which means they're going to play a lot this week. I don't think they'll play preseason 3. Maybe they will. I don't know. But keep an eye on that, because that means that they understood that what they were doing before wasn't working. They got off to slow starts. Now they're trying something new. They're trying to get their guys back out there in game action a lot earlier than normal. And I think that's going to pay dividends. And I think we'll see a difference right out of the gates, especially since they have a couple of teams that they should beat. We know that.
Great point.
I think Joe Burrow is the best quarterback in football, but he has an organization there that is notoriously frugal. And I use the word frugal instead of using the word cheap. They built a great offense, but their defense is absolutely horrendous.
And they rewarded the offensive players with nice contracts this past offseason. The receivers. What did they do to strengthen the defense? Well, they said, no, we're not going to give Hendrickson the money he deserves. And he's like what did he lead the NFL in sacks the last 2 years, or right near the top?
I don't understand this ownership there. I love the offense. I love Burrow, but that defense and their ownership is just horrible.
Well, to what Greg says, it's a great point that they're changing their preseason strategy. And to that, I say, duh. I mean, why not change that strategy for, the hole that you've gotten off into, change things up, mix them up. And that's what Cincinnati's doing here right now this year. I love seeing that. And a couple of other teams that are notoriously slow starters are also playing some starters in the preseason here this year, only because it enables them, gives them a better chance to win football games. I also throw this out here. This is an interesting stat here, guys, that Patrick Mahomes, Drew Brees, and Andrew Luck joined one other quarterback to average at least 275 passing yards in his first 50 career starts. That other quarterback, Joe Burrow.
Yep.
So,
wow.
I know I sound like Joe Burrow's agent here, but
offense is not their problem.
I would like to be Joe Burrow's agent.
And they traveled the fewest miles of the league, only 8,700 miles of air miles for Cincinnati this year, too. So, keep that in mind. That they're going to have to get past Baltimore here.
Mark, I think what you're saying is they might be a great. Well, okay, you say Jacksonville and the Browns, and yes. I consider Jacksonville and the Browns 2 bad teams. Yes. I don't think Jacksonville's going to climb. I think Lawrence has had his years, and he just has never developed out they thought that he would do. Now, granted, he could turn it around with the new coach and everything. That's possible. And how would you play this? You got to lay points on the road. I don't know, is the second game on the road or at home?
Second game
at Cincinnati.
Second game home to Jacksonville, first at Cleveland.
So they're going to be laying points in both games.
Yes. Okay,
so here's what I look for creative ways to play games when I don't have to lay big numbers where the team will win and not cover. I'm not a big favorite player in that regard. So here's a game. Here's what I would do with this, and I think your point is excellent. Play them on the money line, parlay with the second game. You're playing them win 2 games by 1 point each. You don't have to worry about the spread. And if they come out of this funk of being 1-9, you got a winner. I mean, granted, all you're trying to do is make a profit. I'm not a fan of any team or anybody, I just like making a profit. And I think what you just pointed out is the way to do it.
Well, so that even though the Jacksonville game, that's probably going to be a 7-point spread, you're okay with the big money line.
No, because it's in a parlay, so you're really eliminating laying the big
so
juice.
Well, you're lowering the risk.
You've
Right.
done
Yeah.
part.
Yeah.
Okay.
And it's not going to be 7.
It's a rollover parlay. Also, you bet
yeah.
100 on game 1, you collect say 130, or 130. So let's say you get 230 back, whatever it is, and you roll it over into the money line on game 2.
That line with Jacksonville in the second game has to be higher than 7.
I want to mention something about Jacksonville because Doug Peterson did a horrible job there. He took over a team in 2022, I believe was his first year, that had been 3-14 in 2021. First year they go 10-9 because they made the playoffs. Second year, 2023, they go 9-8, and last year they go 4-13. And I wonder because there was a bad culture in Jacksonville the last few years. So will the 2025 Jaguars be closer to the team that was pathetic last year, or the team that actually did well but suffered from poor coaching when they won nearly double-digit games the previous 2 seasons?
Good question.
And they have a highly regarded head coach in that Liam Cohn, who had that issue with Tampa Bay.
It's the first time he's ever been a head coach.
Yeah.
And we have that same issue with
Chicago. Yep.
We got these offensive coordinators or defensive coordinators going up to the head coaching position. They don't always produce at that level. It happened with Spagnuolo, who's
with the Rams,
the best defensive coach in the league. But when he was a head coach, he couldn't do it.
Yeah.
Hey guys, I got to share this with you, and I'm going to share with our viewers out there too. It's my thought that a person who's really serious about handicapping, whether he's professional, semi-serious, as long as he's devoted to handicapping, you can also incorporate a lot of what happens in fantasy leagues into your handicapping, and you can do so because what it does is it opens your eyes to statistics, and lots of great things happen to teams that we're not even aware of, or players that we're not even aware of. But believe me, the Roto World guys are really, really rather aware of that. And there's a site out there called fantasylife.com. And I fell on it yesterday. And there's an article up there that's absolutely terrific about, the things that he points out, where players would be because of the numbers that they put up, so forth and whatnot. He throws things out there like Bo Nix. His 33 combined passing and rushing touchdowns are the 3rd highest in NFL history. That's how good of a year the rookie quarterback Bo Nix had. But you want to check that out. Go to that site, fantasylife.com. You'll find a lot of great stuff. You can add fuel to your fire by incorporating some fantasy numbers into your real world numbers. I just wanted to throw that out. No push, no nothing to them other than the fact that it was a great.
That was a great article you sent from the writer of that.
Yes, wasn't it
259 or whatever facts about the 32 teams, and it's related to with the performance of certain individuals and what they tend to indicate and what they're relative to previous players and previous parts of their career. A lot of good information. I don't play fantasy football anymore, just don't have the time. But I did find that playing in fantasy football helped in the handicapping overall because you're focusing more on individual players rather just on team performance.
Since we're mentioning this site on our site here,
what's that?
We probably should, if we could, reach out to them and do an interview with them.
Yeah, let's bring them on.
Well, I already have a interview scheduled tomorrow with Jared, who is with DraftKings, Draft Sharks, and
he's very good too.
Yeah, actually, Draft Sharks has they have a bunch of analysts, but they've got like 4 or 5 of them that do a really good job, and they won the last 2 awards in all of fantasy football for being the most accurate preseason rankings and how this ends regarding those rankings.
That's excellent. That's excellent. Wow.
Yeah, so they do a really good job. Jared won the award last year. Both guys who were in the company actually compete with me in the Dynasty League that we're in, which is really great because we have a fun time with it. And so we're going to do that tomorrow. I think we're doing it live tomorrow at 2:00. Jared and I are going to go over a bunch of things, and they got a really cool thing too I think it's called Shark Bites, something like that, where he updates on a daily basis. Anytime there's any news story that's out there on the net regarding any injury whatsoever, they post it. And you could just go there and constantly just, on a daily basis, see exactly what's going on.
Greg, did you? There's another site like that, footballguys.com. I think Joe Bryant is the guy who puts it out. And every morning I get an email and talks about all the injury news that occurred within the past 24 hours. It's very good. They've also been doing a lot of football fantasy stuff for 20 years or more. Footballguys.com. And it gets, because sometimes I miss some of the injury information, but it's all there the next morning, the key injuries from the past 24 hours that you can incorporate into your, especially before the start of the season, your assessment of the impact of the injury. And then, of course, on a week going forward basis, you get the ideas as far as what the injuries might do for the upcoming game.
Hey, Greg, there's a question.
It's amazing how much great information is out there on the internet. You really, and these tips for these sites is great to know. Yeah, absolutely.
Hey, Greg, if you would, if you maybe mark these down and ask Jared 2 questions for me on my behalf, if you would.
Sure.
And one involves T. Higgins from Cincinnati, who's healthy, and there'll be a great 1-2 combo. Maybe no better 1-2 combo than him and Jamar Chase, but how does he look at T. Higgins as far as where he positions him and drafting him on a fantasy team? And I'm saying that only because I picked up the fact that he's had a documented hamstring injury of some kind every year since 2019.
Okay.
And, do you take a chance on somebody that is healthy now, but knowing that, that he's injury prone in that particular sense?
Okay.
The other thing is there's a quarterback in this league that is averaged more fantasy points per game, the highest mark of anybody of any quarterback all time ever. And that's Josh Allen. And that's one of the reasons everybody's so high on Josh Allen, because he just keeps building numbers and building numbers and building numbers. As good as Josh Allen is, where would he rank him in his fantasy draft? I know sometimes these good quarterbacks, they don't go to 7th, 8th, 9th rounds. You say, what on God's green earth is he doing that low? But I'm curious as to where Josh Allen would rank, knowing that he's produced the most passing yards or most points, I should say, in fantasy ever all time.
Yeah, just by clicking on T. Higgins right here, he has all this, the site has all this information here, and even puts what you said, detailed injury history, talking about the hamstring injury, each of the last 5 seasons, which remains the biggest concern as far as his profile. Keep in mind too, that fantasy football, of course, you have all these different types of leagues. So a lot's going to depend too on what kind of league you're in. But for the most part, I would say on average, most redraft leagues don't really go into like a whole bunch of bells and whistles. That would be called non-PPR. The dynasty league that we're in is PPR. But for the most part, like for instance, if again, these are just rankings. If we just went to non-PPR here and went overall, this is just overall players. Let's see. Obviously, the quarterbacks don't even get taken in this very early. There's Josh Allen at 26.
First round.
Yep. But yes, that would be first round. But again, that's non-PPR. I'll show you the difference between that. And let's go.
Allen, of course, has valuable with his rushing ability too,
absolutely,
especially scoring touchdowns.
Yeah, and that's why I've actually taken him the last 2 years in my. You see right here in a dynasty draft. He's the second-ranked quarterback behind Jaden Daniels. And, of course, that means the dynasty means, of course, that these are your players for life as long as you're in the league. But Jaden Daniels is actually considered the number 1 quarterback, and I'm sure that has a lot to do with youth. So he's got like 5 years on Allen. And that's what that's the difference. And that's why, again, whenever you're paying attention to rankings and fantasy, just make sure the viewer, just make sure you guys understand. If you're not into fantasy, but you want to use these rankings, just understand those 2 things. Dynasty is completely different than redraft. Redraft is when you draft every year and you get a new team and you have to do it all over again.
And to your point, Greg, and what Mark mentioned before, Josh Allen now has an established history with his length of time in the league. Jaden Daniels does not. The upside is good, but year 2 is so critical. I'd be interested to see where they rank guys like C.J. Stroud and Bryce Young, who now have had 2 years in the league, good first years, regression second years, and now they're in the third year and they're still playing for good teams. Well, Bryce Young is playing for Panthers, but
you mentioned C.J. Stroud, Andy. C.J. Stroud on this FantasyLife.com. He was quarterback number 5, QB5 of all the rankings after that great year he had 2 years ago. He had such a rotten year. He fell to QB 28. He fell as far as how far he fell with his numbers in the 2023 season.
That seems to be value there. If he's down to 28, he's better than that.
Yes, he is. Now he's going to add Nick Chubb to the team.
Yep.
And Nick Chubb has never had average less than 5 yards a carry a season anywhere in the
As long as he stays healthy.
Yes, he averaged just 3.3 last year when he was not healthy. So does a healthy Nick Chubb?
That was another mistake by Cleveland, rushing him back.
Yes, it was.
Oh, they're known for making mistakes.
You think, Jim?
They're good at it. They're really good at it.
Okay, guys, let's look.
That's not the kind of ranking you want to be number 1 in, however.
No. But, just to put a bow on this whole thing, I think it's vitally important to look at fantasy statistics, to dig deeper into players when you're evaluating, even making your power rankings based on players, because it's critically important, and that's what they're best at.
I mean, you have a ball there, and there's a problem that so when you start talking about looking at things from different angles, like you just brought up, Mark.
Yes.
That's the perfect, because you're going to see the world differently if you look at the lake from one side of the lake than the other. It gives you a better view. Now, it can make it very confusing when you have all these viewpoints, but it does broaden your base.
One team I don't think we talked about yet, and it's a very intriguing team given the history of Mike Tomlin, the coach, and that's the Pittsburgh Steelers, who now have their best quarterback in a number of years since Ben Roethlisberger retired, with Aaron Rodgers there. He's got receivers, etc. there that have come in. Does Tomlin's record of never having a losing season continue? I think a lot of it has to do with the division games, the 2 against Cleveland and the 2 against Cincinnati. But he seems to find a way during the season to get his team to overachieve as far as the suggested talent level goes. I cannot bet against Mike Tomlin winning 9 games this year.
I like to, I'm going to just jump in here.
Sure.
I really feel the Steelers are going to finish second in this division. I just, defense wins a lot of things, and they have a defense, and the Browns are not good, and the Bengals are going to put up a lot of points and give up a lot of points. And if Rodgers plays just like he did last year, which was not that bad, and that defense and Tomlin's coaching, they're going to be hard to beat.
Well, you got a 40-year-old Rodgers, though, Jim, and that's the question here.
Yes, it is.
He's been going backwards, and as most 40-year-olds do in the National Football League. Is there fuel in the tank left? That's the question.
Well, he's going to take more ashwagandha.
What's that?
He's going to take more of that ashwagandha stuff that he likes.
Oh, yeah, those mushrooms, huh?
From what I understand,
we've had successful
stuff works. I don't know.
We've had successful 40-year-old quarterbacks in the past, and they're usually those who are of the elite Hall of Fame stature, and Rodgers certainly fits that.
Yes, he sure does. He sure does.
And they say that often when you come off the injury that he came off of, that he had that first game with the Jets 2 years ago, it's often the second year that you see such quarterbacks return to close to the form they showed before the injury. Now, of course, mitigating that is the advanced 2 years of age. I mean, it's a little bit different if you're 30 years old as opposed to 40 years old, but there is enough there to suggest. And I think Rodgers is he's a competitor, and I think he wants to show. When wanting to show does not mean it's going to translate into wins, but I want him to show that he still has stuff left, and he was deserving of getting the contract, and he wants to go out. He's not going to go out like John Elway, but I think he'll go out with a winning season.
Well, right now in the North Division, AFC North Division, obviously Baltimore favored minus 165 to win the division. Cincinnati next at plus 275. Then there's the Steelers at plus 500 and the Browns at plus 3,500. That's a lottery ticket, and that's about the chance to stand with the Browns. But there's Pittsburgh at plus 500. Jim, do you think that's value for the Pittsburgh Steelers to win that division?
No, I don't think they win the division, but I like the.
How about making the playoffs? What's their?
I think what I'm doing with them is I like the fact that The Ravens win it. Steelers come second. I like that. What Mark or
Probably
Greg
showed, yeah.
pointed out before, the exact finish. I think that's a possibility. And for them to make the playoffs, I think is a strong possibility.
Very good. So let's look at another division here, guys, if we can. Let's hit on the AFC South. We talked about the Texans. We hit on them just a little bit. They're plus 105 to win their division. Is there a bounce back season for the Texans here this year? And who is their competition? Is there any competition in the AFC South?
I don't see it. I think all three teams, other than them, are pretty bad.
Yes.
And unsettled. The question I have with the Texans and Stroud, was his fall off last year his fault? Was it injuries to the offensive line? I know they lost some wide receivers. I don't know who to put that on. Now, I like their coach.
Tougher schedule.
Yes.
They went from a fourth place schedule, I think it was, to a first place schedule.
And what happens this year? What are we looking at?
First place schedule again.
Okay.
Yeah. And their offensive line is just bad. I mean,
this is a division where the team could have 7 wins and win the division.
I wouldn't get that crazy, but yeah.
How about
9 and 8 could win.
Yeah,
how about 8,
good.
How about 8 and 9?
8 and 9.
Well, look, I think Jacksonville and Indianapolis have talent, and I just think it's a matter of whether or not we know what it's all about. And I don't think anybody believes in Jones or Richardson at this point. So I think the Colts are probably headed towards a season where, the new ownership is just going to have to make their own decision when the season's over and clean house. With the Jags, I would give them a shot just because of the fact that they have a good coach who knows how to get the most out of the offense and take the pressure off the quarterback and run the football, which is what Trevor Lawrence needs. Now, I don't think they have a great offensive line either, but I do think they're going to have more stable coaching, and they do have some talent on the team. So, and we saw Trevor Lawrence just 2 years ago when they went to the playoffs. He had a great season, and everybody expected he was going to have like his best season ever the year after, and that's when everything imploded. So I know the talent's there, and so I wouldn't. So yeah, if I think there's no question. I think Jacksonville has a chance to maybe surprise and win the division, but Houston's clearly at the top.
What are the odds for the fit? What are the odds in that division for it to finish? The odds for in the AFC South for the that 1-2 combination for it to finish Houston Jaguars, the Texans Jaguars.
Texans plus 105, Jags plus 300. Colts plus 370 and Titans plus 650.
No, I'm looking at the one there plus 450 for it's Houston to finish ahead of Jacksonville first and second. That's not a bad price at all.
That's probably a decent bet.
Actually. You can actually do both of them because of the price, and all you need is one of them to come through.
Yeah, I just can't see the Jags because Houston's a double-digit winning team because of their defense.
Yeah, and their coaching. That's the thing.
And the coaching.
Yeah.
Yeah, I do.
I like that one.
The coordinator this year too. They got the hot coordinator.
Yeah.
Okay, guys, let's move it over to the AFC West. We want to wrap this up here, and before we get out of here, I want to ask everybody what their surprise team in the league will be, because next week when we do the NFC, we're also going to get into some predictions. Not so much on this show for predictions, but at least a review of the conference. So let's take a look at that AFC West right now. You've got Kansas City sitting there. Obviously, they bring a lot to the table here. Minus 120 to win the division. I think Denver's getting a lot of hype this year, rightfully so, for what they did last year, plus 275. The Chargers are plus 350, and the Raiders plus 2,000.
Who led the NFL last year in fewest points allowed per game? It's one of those four.
Denver.
Chargers.
Jim Harbaugh. There we go.
Well,
first year.
They were benefited late in the season from playing.
They were real close with Denver, by the way, very close.
I like Denver to win this division, but you can't. I like Denver. I like a Denver Chiefs finish, and I don't think the Raiders or the Chargers make the playoffs.
So does the Super Bowl jinx factor into Kansas City this year? That's a big question.
Yes.
I've completely torn that down apart. Andy Reid has not played well in years that he's lost the Super Bowl with Philadelphia. In fact, you look at his record for his football teams after he's lost the Super Bowl when he comes back as that loser. 5-11 to the spread the first year, 8-9 the next year.
If you're talking about point spread, you're right. But if you're talking about wins and making the playoffs, they've won 9 consecutive division titles in the AFC West. So, but you're right about the point spread. Yes, fade them this year.
Yes, as that's what we're all about, the point spread here. That's my point to Andy Reid. Will Kansas City suffer to the point spread this year? They're going to have that onus on their back again this year. Andy Reid has not proven that his teams can bounce back. Are you going to have any problem, Jim, fading this Kansas City team at the betting window?
Well, at some point, everything comes to an end. But Reid has had a great run. Mahomes has had a great run. Kelsey's had a great
Spagnola's had a great run.
Yeah. You got everything going there. You cannot really knock them. They won a lot of close games, a lot of one-score games. Their offensive line fell apart against the Eagles, and they had that. Now, can they repair the offensive line? Can they get the wide receivers to actually be there and play, because they've had problems with that? Can you give Mahomes some time? Can you give him a running game? These are all the things. You got to plug these holes. The problem is they're going up against 3 Super Bowl head coaches in this division. This is a bitch
that's a great stat. Great stat, Jim.
Really hard.
Yep.
Super Bowl winning coaches.
Yes. I mean, I've never seen a division with this many great coaches.
I'm going to answer the question this way, Mark.
Yes.
I think it's going to depend upon the adjustments made in the line for Kansas City based upon their close wins last year, yet they were still almost, 9-10-1, according to the playbook preview. But if, let's see what happens if Kansas City, instead of being favored by 7 against a division rival that they were, let's say, last year, if now they're only favored by, say, 3.5 or 4.
That's a big difference. And the hunger. How hungry are you after you've won 9 straight divisions and been to 5 out of 6 Super Bowls?
And how lucky can you continue to be as well?
Yeah.
Because just look at the Chargers. I mean, when are they going to have a rash of injuries where it just doesn't matter? There's too many injuries. Every team has injuries. They had injuries last year. They weren't completely healthy. We saw that, but I'm talking about the series. I'm talking about the Mahomes, the Chris Jones, the difference maker injuries, the Travis Kelce. They don't have those injuries. That's why they've been very fortunate.
Guys, I don't think people know this. You can win another bar bet. The Chiefs actually allowed, if you take a look at their record last football season here, more yards per game than they gained, and yet made it to the Super Bowl. That's an Andy Reid characteristic about his football teams. You see some holes in their numbers. There's always holes in the Chiefs' numbers here, but somehow Andy Reid patches those holes and gets his team to play, and he gets the win, albeit in close call games.
He does it what Cincinnati cannot do.
He does what Cincinnati cannot do. Exactly.
Yeah. Close games where they're outgained, and I think, Mark, the term you would use is his teams are efficient.
Yes, absolutely.
Andy Reid.
Absolutely. That's the reason he makes $20 million a year, Andy. He's the number 1 paid coach in the league. Should be.
Yeah. And by the way, just to clarify, they were outgained last year. And I think, Mark, your stats include, postseason by 1 yard.
Yes, by 1 yard.
It's still outgained, but it's basically neutral. But however, if you want to use that as an indicator, why is Kansas City not 8-9 and 9-8? Because they managed to win the close games.
That's right. And it still wins the bar bet. Okay.
Yep. Yes, true.
Yes. Okay, inside this division here, guys, Chargers, we know all about Jim Harbaugh. We've talked about him. 11-6 record last year. That was a significant improvement from the 5-12 the year before.
Kind of like what he did in San Francisco when he took over a lousy 49ers team and got him to the NFC Championship game in his first year, and against brother John Harbaugh to the Super Bowl in his second year. This is his second year here. He's rebuilt this team much like he did the 49ers.
So my question is do the Chargers warrant, or the Broncos warrant being favored more than the Chargers do in this division off of last year's Bo Nix season, Sean Payton season? Here's the Chargers, the third choice in this division here, with Jim Harbaugh, with Justin Herbert. I think it's going to be a real fight down battle to the end here. Greg, what do you see here between the Broncos and the Chargers? How do you separate these two teams?
I still think Denver has a better defense, and I think that will definitely help. Also, Peyton has a leg up on Harbaugh. He's been coaching in the NFL forever. Harbaugh just had to come back to the NFL, as great as a coach as he is. And he does not have, I think, a little bit more of a support system that Peyton has. So I think that's going to take a little while. I still think they have a couple more drafts to go before they could be considered like a true upper echelon team. I don't think they're there right now. I'm not saying Denver is yet, but I think we all expect Denver to take that next step because of just the way Peyton coaches Knicks after the way he played last year. So I think that would be the one thing that sticks out more than anything to me. Plus, I think Denver is going to have a much better running game. Harvey is a good young running back. They didn't have any running game. They haven't had any running game at all there in Denver for like 3 years. Since Peyton's been there, they've had nothing out of the running back position. I think that's going to change. Obviously, Dobbins has got to stay healthy. He couldn't stay healthy for the Chargers, couldn't stay healthy for the Ravens. But again, they have Harvey. So I think if he stays healthy, that'll give him a better running game. And they had nothing at the tight end position, and now they get Ingram. So
I've got a question for you, Greg, about Denver. We all know about the concerns about Jaden Daniel in his second year with Washington. Will he regress? What about the same situation for Bo Nix in his second year, considering the fact that 6 games within the division are against those Super Bowl winning coaches?
Well, I'd have to see, first of all, and I understand the whole idea about rookies regressing, like what happened with C.J. Stroud. But for the most part, if you look at it, the really good ones, it's a stepping stone each year to better play. And that's what Bo Nix is. That's what Jaden Daniels is. I do not expect
you look at guys like Elway. You look at guys like Marino, who had good second years as well. Yep. So
and that's what I expect. Yeah, I know exactly. We don't know, but and again, you got support systems too. Again, I'm not going to put Quinn on to the same level, but they've done a good job of putting a nice staff together there. So yeah, I think that both of those quarterbacks are going to be just fine.
Well, we know Sean Payton's a quarterback whisperer as the head coach. Obviously groomed Drew Brees into the Hall of Fame. He did a great job with Bo Nix. He absolutely loves Bo Nix for what he brings to the table here. And it's sort of not a fluke. You look at what he did last year. He had 33 passing and rushing touchdowns combined. That's the third highest in National Football League history, Bo Nix did. So he really broke through to the other side. Now, the real question is, can there be a letdown, a sophomore blues letdown for Bo Nix?
Well, there can be, but you look at this roster, starting off with Greg said, the defense. I mean, they have a really solid defense, a really solid coaching staff. They finally have what looks to be a decent running game. I think the roster overall is better than the Chargers. And that's why I elevate them above that, and think that that you could have regression out of the Chiefs coming off the Super Bowl loss, and there's always got to be a hunger situation when somebody's won 9 straight divisions. It's I know, and you can't knock Andy Reid, you can't knock Spagnuolo, you can't knock Mahomes. There's really nothing to say negative about that, but there's always somebody that's going to come up and bite you, and the Broncos just seem like they're in the right position to do it.
Jim, does the fact we know how motivated Mahomes is, the fact of, and he's been talking about all offseason, the embarrassment of that loss to the Eagles, forget the final score, it was 34-0 at one point. Does that sort of change a little bit of dynamic, Mark, as well, as far as, the Super Bowl quote-unquote hangover, etc.? You're not talking about any quarterback or any team. You're talking about a future Hall of Fame coach and a future Hall of Fame player, especially the player who's been extremely motivated and, what he can do. I mean, the rest of the team feeds off his energy.
All true.
All right, guys.
The problem is I really can't put the blame for that loss on Mahomes. I mean, their offensive line.
He doesn't care. It's a loss. He doesn't care.
Their offensive line was a mess. Their defensive line was a mess. And Philadelphia, quite frankly, was just far superior.
Yeah.
And I mean, Mahomes should not be ashamed. He had no time to throw the ball. He couldn't even stand up without getting killed.
I think all those injuries you mentioned, especially the offensive line, is probably a good explanation as to why they won so many close games last year as opposed to years in the past. And yet in the one game that mattered the most, it hurt them the most, those injuries.
True.
All right, guys, let's wrap it up here. 2 questions for each of our panel here. The most disappointing team in the AFC this year, the most surprising team in the AFC this year. Greg, I'm going to start out with you.
The most disappointing and the most surprising. So basically, one pro and one negative.
Yes.
All right. Let's see.
Or while Greg's looking, if you Andy or Jim have your answers, jump in if you will.
Yeah, I think one of the most surprising teams is going to be the Steelers. The second most surprising team is the team we just talked about with the Broncos. That's on the positive side. The most negative could be the one with the best quarterback in the league. And if they get into a funk like they did last year with giving up 30, 40 points a game and putting up a ton of points on offense, and they're losing and losing and losing and losing, you could see a team go in the dumps, totally depressed, because there's already problems in Cincinnati between players, coaches, management. It's all there. That could be the most disappointing team because we rank Burrow at the highest level of quarterbacking in the league. And to watch Burrow go through hell with this terrible franchise could be the most disappointing team.
All right, guys, I'll jump in here while Greg's still looking. To me, I think the most disappointing team is going to be the Kansas City Chiefs. There's a lot of competition in the AFC West, a lot of good competition in the AFC West. Jim brings out an excellent point. All Super Bowl winning coaches in the AFC West. If Andy Reid loses out to any one of them, it's not an embarrassment.
Right.
If they don't make the playoffs, now that's another story, and that's what I'm looking at, the possibility thereof. But my most surprising team, and you could say, you better get me over to Dr. Jennifer Melfi from The Sopranos, that psychiatrist.
I'm going to be curious, Mark, because I think we may be on the same team.
I don't think so, Andy. I don't think so. We haven't even talked about them.
I can't wait to hear it. I can't hear what it is.
I'm going to go with the Tennessee Titans.
Whoa.
Is that a little bit of a surprise?
Yeah, they're minus 600 to miss the playoffs. Yeah, that's a surprise.
Yeah. Well, what I'm looking at here, guys, is this. Number one, the neighborhood they live in, it's very, very soft. Look at what they did last year under Brian Callahan. They went 2-15 to the spread. First of all, that makes them a play-on team this year to the spread, because you talk about just the law of averages getting back to the norm. They're not going to sit at 2-15 this year. I guarantee you that. But what impressed me most about this football team last year, there are only 2 teams in the league last year that improved their offensive and their defensive stats statistically, but went backwards straight up and against the spread. And every time you find teams like that, there's always improvement to them the next year. Tennessee is one of those 2 football teams this year. You've got Cam Ward, nobody knows anything about, who I think is going to be terrific in the National Football League. He's not lacking competence, that's for sure.
Is the other team in the NFC, and you're saving it for next week?
Yes.
Okay.
Another bar bet next week, Andy. Okay. So that's my guy. You can remind me at the end of the season about Tennessee. Last year, heck, I picked the Cleveland Browns to win the division. So, take that with a grain of salt too, if you will. But Tennessee is going to be my surprise team in the National Football League this year because of the neighborhood they live and the hidden stats they put up last year with Cam Ward, their new quarterback.
And keep in mind, we're going to have our
disappointing team.
NFL.
Disappointing team. Kansas City.
Sorry, yeah.
I'm sorry, Greg. Go ahead.
And keep in mind, we're going to have our final NFL predictions are going to be in 2 weeks. So that's NFC's next week. We're also going to take a look at week 0 in college football. And then in 2 weeks, we're going to have our AFC plus NFC final predictions, Super Bowl, all that kind of cool stuff. So just letting everybody know what our schedule will look like over the next few weeks. And are you ready? Did you finish, Mark?
Yeah, I'm finished, but I'll throw one other little thing on the Kansas City cake, if I will. I'm thinking they left the cake out in the rain. Kansas City has here. Travis Kelce, and I got this from this fantasy site, okay? Travis Kelce is ranked among the league's bottom 10 tight ends in passer rating when targeted. If you take a look at receiving scores, yards, and catches per reception and targeted, he's ranked in the bottom 10 of the National Football League. Do you think that could possibly be a Taylor Swift factoring into his decline?
How far back does that stat go? Just last year?
He's already caught Taylor Swift. What else does he need to catch?
No, Mark, is that based upon just last year or going back several years? Because Taylor Swift, I believe, was just last year.
I believe it was last year. Yes, it was.
Okay. I'll go next with very limited commentary since I talked about it before, and Greg can wrap up. My surprise team this year will be the Jacksonville Jaguars. Again, I go back to their winning seasons the past 2 years, 2 years before last year. There's still some talent there. I like the head coach, and we're not asking him to do all that much to show the improvement that I expect to see from them. Like I said, I like Texans Jaguar as a 1-2 punch. My disappointing team, and they may not disappoint as much as a lot of people might think, but I think the expectations are a little bit too high based on season wins for the New England Patriots.
I agree with that, Andy.
So when I do surprise and disappointments, I generally go with the expectations for season wins as a barometer for surprise and disappointment.
Excellent.
Yeah,
Greg?
there's way too much hype on them, and I think a lot of it has to do with also their schedule. Everybody's pointing to an easy schedule, which I don't think is as easy. And Jim and I went over this a few weeks ago.
How was their schedule? How was their schedule 2 years ago, if you recall, when they also finished 4-12 and 4-13 and finished it up last year with the easy schedule?
That was Belichick's last year.
I believe so. Yeah.
Okay.
23. Yeah, 2023. Yeah.
Do you have last year's playbook preview guide there, Greg?
Well, I do. They were 4-13 both of the last 2 years. I'm just looking at their. In other words, last year I think they played a fourth place schedule because I think they finished fourth in Belichick's last year. I think they finished behind the Jets.
Okay.
Let's see. 4-13.
Let's see. All right. So while you're looking that up,
Jets finished with better records than the Patriots in 2023 and 2024.
Wow. Who would have thought that? Speaking of the Jets, I'm going to have two of the long shot teams as my surprise possibilities. That'll be Las Vegas and the Jets. Jets for obvious reasons, and also Las Vegas for obvious reasons in my mind. Both of those teams are going to get a shot of adrenaline from the unbelievable coaching uptick that they're both getting. I throw in the fact that the Raiders are getting Geno Smith, and the Jets are getting Justin Fields. You get two quarterbacks those teams have been starving for in a while, and a new, really good coaching staff, and I think that's going to help them out big time. Denver will be my top surprise team, meaning just like Jim had as far as with Pittsburgh, and I'm talking about a Super Bowl sleeper type of a surprise team. And then the opposite, I'm going to go with a tie between Los Angeles and Pittsburgh, LA Chargers and Pittsburgh. I'm not sure which way, but I just think that both teams are vulnerable. So I think one of those teams could, because Pittsburgh, what happened last year, and and I've already been through the Aaron Rodgers thing, and I just know how that could distract the team. I don't know how this whole thing's going to play out with their offensive coordinator, who just is Mr. I want to run the football down your throat, and Aaron Rodgers, who wants nothing to do with the running game. So I just don't know how that's going to work. And then throw in the fact that I'll throw in, of course, Miami as one of those other teams, sort of like what Andy said with the Patriots. I'll say with Miami, and that is just the fact that it's probably not too big of a surprise because a lot of people are throwing the Dolphins out there. And matter of fact, every time you look at a team who's the first coach, it's on the hot seat. They're all pointing to the Dolphins. So it's not like it's a big surprise, but. The Miami Dolphins are probably the one team that might be in the biggest trouble.
By the way, the Miami Dolphins opened at the Westgate season win total of 8.5, as did the New England Patriots. So those of them were similar expectations. Miami has now been bet down as of the beginning of August, 7.5, -110 each way, while the Patriots, who opened 8.5 with the under priced at -150, so the expectations were a little bit high based upon that VIG. They're still at 8.5, but the VIG is down to only -130. So there has been betting optimism shown on the Patriots based upon the change in the VIG, but there's been a great deal of pessimism on the Dolphins. To see a total move by a complete full game is very unusual.
Yeah, it is.
Okay, guys, closing thoughts from the show. Around the horn real quick. That was a great show that was canceled, unfortunately. But we're going to go around the horn real quick. Jim, your thoughts on the AFC this year? Any closing thought?
I think it's going to be a very interesting season because there's so much balance, and you're going to see a lot of upsets. There is a top and a bottom to this league, like we saw last year, and until these teams, especially these teams that are not very good, start to gel, and that's going to take a while because you only play three preseason games. They don't get that much practice. They don't hit that much. You're going to see a lot of garbage play early, but it might take 4 or 5 to some of the weeks until some of these worst teams start to look like they actually belong in the league. So I'm looking for be careful with the underdogs early because you might not get some competitive balance.
A word of warning from Jim Feist. Beware of them dogs early. They might not be barking. Andy Iskoe, final thoughts, AFC this year.
Well, I'm going to – I like a number of teams. I like Buffalo quite a bit. I'm going to go with the 2 teams that I'm probably going to predict in a couple of weeks to make the AFC Championship game. It's going to be a very friendly game, a family game. I'm going to go with the Harbaugh brothers, the Ravens and the Chargers. John Harbaugh is, and I'm the playbook right now, the playbook preview, 18th year. He is 185 and 115 straight up. That's very impressive. I think his point spread record over those 17 years is even more impressive. 157 and 130 with 13 pushes. We all know the success that Jim Harbaugh had with the 49ers, and he had last year with the Chargers. In fact, I'm just going to run over there right now and see if I can get his point spread record. 11-7 straight up. That includes the ugly playoff loss, as does their 12-5-1 point spread record for the Chargers last year. And that 5, it was a 4 in the regular season. So in the 17 games, Harbaugh in his first year taking over one of the worst coach teams in the NFL in the last 25 years. To go 10-7 in the regular season was accomplishment enough, and I liked him quite a bit as soon as they named him coach. But to go 12-4-1 against the spread says a lot about his ability throughout the season to get his team ready to play football games.
Very good. I like that analogy as well. Greg DePalma, your closing thoughts, AFC this year.
I think it's going to be a lot tighter. I think it's going to be a lot more competitive. A lot, of course, is going to depend on injuries. As long as there are no big injuries to the quarterback position for a lot of those teams that are trying to take that next step, then I think there's a chance that we could see a little bit more parity in the AFC that we've seen in a while.
We have a comment from one of our viewers. Roger said, Bengals over are a thing. I agree with that. They have nothing. They
over 10 wins.
They did nothing to address that defense. Joe might have to score every time. I totally agree that is an over. The total over for the Bengals in every game would be a bet for me.
Oh, he's talking about the individual game totals. I thought he was talking about season wins over.
I'm talking about the team total per game. Yes, that's what
absolutely.
he's talking about. Right.
Well, if that's the case, then the Bengals are not going to have a successful season.
No, they're not.
And I don't think they changed their defensive coordinator just for shits and giggles. I think they did it because they added a guy that had been there before, knows the surroundings, has been a successful coach in football. And I think they had a lot of injuries last year on defense. They're a better team, better personnel on defense. So
that's only if Hendrickson comes to terms. If he ends the holdout.
No, that's
without him.
Done. Yeah, he's in. That's done.
That's done. Was that it?
That's done. Yeah, he signed.
Yeah, okay.
Yeah, he's good. In. And the rookie's in. Yeah. So, again, these guys have to come in. That's why it's so silly when we talk about it. They're not holding out. They never hold out. They can't hold out. So I think the Bengals are going to be, in my opinion, barring injuries, I think the defense is going to be back to where they were a couple of years ago when they were heading basically right up there with Baltimore and Pittsburgh battling for the division lead. And instead of having Baltimore come back and win games the way that they have the last year or two, I think the Bengals are going to be able to hold on and beat the Ravens because their defense is going to be improved.
Very good, guys. It's been a great show here. I'm going to say one thing in closing, my thoughts, and sometimes I refuse to let this go. But I read a great quote, if you will, by Cam Ward. They did a real extensive interview with him, and I think he's going to be the real deal this year personally. And they asked him what his approach is when he takes the football field. And his answer was, my approach is I don't give a flying F.
Yes.
So again,
and that could be a pro and a negative, because we've seen that from him in college.
It could.
Yeah.
But we'll see. This was a great show, guys. I'm going to look forward to next week's NFC preview here. We're going to tear that down, and we're also going to get into week 0 of the college football card next week. So we've got a little bit of a doubleheader show on tap next week. I want to thank our panel of experts for a great job on the show this week. Andy Iskoe from TheLogicalApproach.com in Las Vegas. The legend himself, Jim Feist, joining us from Las Vegas as well. And Greg DePalma, our producer for the gang. Until next week, once again, this is Mark Lawrence reminding you to always remember to bet with your head, not over it, and good luck as always.